Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Woodall. I'm a teacher in Cornelius, North Carolina, which is near the Charlotte area. And this has been my 6th year teaching. I'll be going on my 7th year teaching. I taught first grade for my first year in Charleston, South Carolina. And the last 5 years, I've been at the same elementary school in North Carolina teaching kindergarten. And a lot of my experience has been the reason I've taken an interest in the science of reading as my topic. So this is called the effect of the science of reading. Before I move on, I'd like to define the science of reading as best I can. It is an interdisciplinary body of scientifically based research about reading and issues related to writing that's been conducted 5 decades across the world. So it's just been research piled on top of research over the years. And it's always been controversial, and it continues to make light in the media and then go away and then reappear in the media and go away. So it's something that's continuing to circle around after a couple of years every so often. And recently, it has become very popular in the media again, especially now that a lot of school districts, specifically in the state of North Carolina, are requiring teachers to take an extensive training on the science of reading named letters training. I've also recently learned, talking to other teachers and professors, that the science of reading is also being used as a training in other states. It's just named something different than letters training. The purpose of this study, I wanted to determine what ways the science of reading affects student literacy achievement and experience, because I've been around when we were not using the science of reading to where it's become this huge thing that we need to incorporate into our literacy block. And now we're going to be doing an extensive training on the science of reading. And so I just want to see, is there a significant difference? Is there no difference? What areas there's a difference? How teachers' perspective is on the science of reading versus when we were not using the science of reading, how data is in our DIBELS data, comparing it from the 2018-19 school year before COVID and the pandemic hit to our upcoming school year, 2022-2023, now that we've been using the science of reading in our programs, and there'll be an extensive training as well. I would also like to determine which components of the science of reading are making a significant impact. Is it just one component? Is it multiple components? Is it the way the teacher might be implementing the science of reading? What is truly making a difference, if there is a difference? Major findings of my lit review: the science of reading has been around for a while, since the 18th century, and it's reemerged over the last few years due to controversy sparked by Mark Seidenberg's book, Language of the Speed of Sight: How We Read, Why So Many Can't, and What Can Be Done About It. A huge thing I also learned about is what they refer to as reading wars, which has been around since the beginning of the science of reading, between positivists who favored explicit instruction versus constructivists who wanted children to have the opportunity to find meaning through experience. Two big components or theories that back the science of reading are called Scarborough's rope and the simple view of reading. Scarborough's rope is different strands of reading, specifically language comprehension and word recognition. Together, they make a skilled reader, and there's multiple strands of each component. And then the simple view of reading is when decoding and language comprehension are combined to increase reading comprehension. Advocates of the science of reading have invoked the simple view of reading for decoding, and then skilled reading is a combination of different strands of the rope. And as you can see, there's multiple strands that I've listed. Phonological awareness, decoding, and sight words are big components of Scarborough's rope. What I found based on previous studies that are more recent is that throughout the past decade, a lot of research has found as limitations that teachers are not being trained a lot on the science of reading, so they're not knowledgeable on how to implement it correctly in their classroom. There's been evidence that phonics focus groups, as well as meaning focus groups, were not teaching the science of reading to fidelity within a study. There is a lack of professional development covering the science of reading, which might be why all these required developments are being taught over the next school year in several different school districts. Science of reading is a term has been used variously in different research as an intensive focus on assessed reading proficiency as the primary goal of reading instruction. Elementary teachers must have a wide range of knowledge in order to correctly understand the different components that go into teaching students how to read. So a lot of the research that I've read through that have been previous studies that include some form of the science of reading are basically saying teachers are not, they're not taught extensively enough to understand how to properly implement the science of reading. My 2 questions for my qualitative study. Question 1, in what ways does the science of reading impact literacy development for kindergarten and first grade students? And my second question is there a difference in student literacy achievement in kindergarten and first grade students when the science of reading is implemented compared to when the science of reading was not implemented? And I'm specifically, as I mentioned earlier on, comparing the 2018-19 school year, because that was prior to COVID, to the upcoming school year, 2022-2023, because all of our COVID limitations have gone away. We're back in school 100%. There's no virtual, it's all back to normal. So it's comparing apples to apples. Theoretical framework, I chose to use the cognitive development theory by Jean Piaget. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I need to make sure I figure out how to say that correctly. So forgive me if I pronounce her name incorrectly. And her theory suggests that intelligence just changes children grow. There's different phases that they go through throughout their childhood. This informs my questions because I'm focusing on ways in which children in kindergarten and first grade learn foundation literacy skills best, and if the science of reading programs and strategies affect how children develop literacy skills. And most of them will be in their pre-operational and concrete stages because they're ages 5 through 7 in kinder and first. Some questions that this will also form are, how do students learn phonemic skills? How do students retain letter and letter sound recognition? Because both of those are important components of reading. And how do students develop reading comprehension skills? My conceptual framework relies on the 5 components of reading: phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, fluency, and reading comprehension. These 5 components of reading make up the science of reading and the different components children need in order to learn to read. How do the science of reading strategies and programs address each of these 5 different components: phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, fluency, and reading comprehension? So I want to see how are these programs zoning in on those 5 different skills. The phenomenology will be used for this study. I plan to use the Dibbles benchmark literacy scores from the 18-19 school year to the 22-23 school year in first and kindergarten. And I'll be comparing their BOY and MOY, which would be beginning of the year, which is typically within August, and then middle of the year, which is usually either the end of December or beginning of January. Their nonsense word fluency test is what I plan to compare, because when talking to my district, that's what they're able to provide me from that school year that is also being tested next school year. That way it's the same test. I will also heavily be relying on interviews, observations, focus groups, and data collection for this dissertation from the teachers that have been there from the 2018-19 school year and will still be there next school year. The phenomenology focuses on individual experience and perspective, which is why I chose to use that as the research approach. As I mentioned, the participation selection, there'll most likely be around 6 participants because over the years since 2018-19, we've lost teachers, teachers have changed grade levels, we've gained new teachers. And in order to make a fair comparison, it needs to be teachers in first and kindergarten specifically that were there in the 2018-19 school year and will still be there next year in order for them to be around for the change that's occurred and still occurring with the science of reading. And that goes into my reasoning. My DIBELS is being used as numerical data because that's the only data that's the same from 2018-19 to 2022-2023 that would provide us with some form of literacy achievement data, along with the interviews, the focus groups, and the surveys. My 4 qualitative data forms. Teacher survey, I would like to do this because I feel it will guide me to be able to create some very specific questions for interviews and focus groups. And I also would like to have a scale in there to provide more numeric data in order to compare the perspectives of teachers. I plan to use DIBELS as one of my data points, interviews, and focus groups. And then this just goes into my data analysis. It's important that I keep everything organized. So I plan to use the 5 components of reading for coding for my interviews and my surveys. I'll also see what the trend is in teacher perceptions for the survey scales, the numerical data trend, whether it goes up, down, or stays the same for DIBELS data. And then I plan to color coordinate my transcripts, use sticky notes, and the Excel software that's through Carson Newman. Here are my different techniques. I have my credibility through triangulation, member checking, and the DIBELS artifacts, transferability through member checking, and it will also occur after interviews and focus groups. Dependability, a detailed context that's sufficiently thick, and I will describe the body language and social interactions within the focus group, and then confirmability through triangulation in my peer debriefer. It's important to use ethical considerations, and I'm sure I'll be adding more to this. For now, my participant consent methods include my informed consent forms which will be explained to my participants. Everything will be voluntary and they can discontinue being a participant whenever they choose. If they choose, hopefully they will not. The description of research will be provided prior to beginning any of my study, and the researcher and participant will sign and date the same form. Techniques, each form and data collection, the survey will be anonymous. And the reporting write-up, any of my teachers will be referred to as teacher A, teacher B, so their name will not be used. I'll make sure all of my files will be password protected and secured away from others when I'm not in the room. And then in my peer debriefing, it will also be anonymous because I will protect their name through my research in my peer debriefing. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Okay, wait, that's not ending yet. Have a good one.